Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for September 18th, 2025. Today we're going to start off with this post from the ex-Mormon subreddit that says, I do not even know where to start. I have been the good wife, the good mom, the perfect Mormon woman for so long, it feels strange even writing this. For years, my life was church on Sunday, callings I did not want, baking casseroles for people I barely knew, and telling myself being a stay-at-home mom was the holiest thing I could do. But honestly, it was a sham. It left me feeling empty and invisible. The truth is, the cracks started years ago. Learning about Joseph Smith's wives, how some were teenagers and some were already married, never sat right with me. The church's racist priesthood ban and the way doctrine changes while they pretend it never did always made my stomach turn. I kept shoving it down and telling myself to just have faith, but it never stopped bothering me. I prayed for peace about it and got silence. Last summer I stopped wearing garments. At first it was just so I could wear tank tops and short shorts without looking ridiculous. But then I realized how much I loved it. I loved the sun on my bare shoulders. I loved the way my legs looked in the mirror. Sometimes now I skip it completely and it makes me feel alive in this quiet, secret way. Like I am taking something back that was stolen from me a long time ago. When I finally told my husband I was done with the church, he got quiet. Then he said my mother-in-law had been right about me all along. That hit harder than I thought it would. We ended up yelling, really yelling, for the first time in years. It got bad. I grabbed a bag and went to my sister's. I have been here for a week now trying to figure out what comes next. I do not want to lose my family, but there is something shifting inside me and I am not sure I can stop it. It is like once I opened this door, I cannot close it again. The person I'm becoming is almost familiar. I knew her when I was in my 20s and I am finding her again now. I do not know if I should fight it or follow it. Has anyone else been here before? What did you do? To me, this post is both haunting and beautiful. It's as if her own self, the real her, has been following her all this time, just waiting for her to accept herself. The beauty of self-acceptance is juxtaposed against the fear of loss and the reality of leaving a high-demand religion. Her struggle at the beginning is so common for people whose identity is tied to an institution rather than their authentic self. Her life as a good Mormon woman was a series of actions, casseroles, callings, without the genuine connection or purpose she needed. Her prayer for peace and the resulting silence is also a very common experience among those who feel they have given everything to their faith but receive no spiritual confirmation in return. This silence often leads people to believe that the problem is with them, not the institution. I know I landed at that conclusion over and over again when I didn't receive the confirmations I was supposed to. When she talks about her garments as a feeling of taking something back that was stolen, I actually got chills. And then her husband's reaction shows a fundamental misunderstanding of her crisis. Her husband sees it as a betrayal of their shared identity and values. The fear of losing her family and the simultaneous feeling that she cannot stop this internal shift is the core tension of this entire experience. Her journey is not just about a change in belief, but a fundamental change in who she accepts herself to be, and that is terrifying for everyone involved. What advice would you give her? Now let's go to religionnews.com to learn about Sharon Eubank. This article says, I was thrilled to sit down with Sharon Eubank, Director of Humanitarian Services for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, via Zoom on September 5th. Since 2011, when she began the role, the department's budget has quintupled as it engages in relief projects around the world. Now she is an author. Her book, Doing Small Things with Great Love, How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World, will publish September 16th. They then ask, as Director of Humanitarian Services for the LDS Church, how much travel are you still doing around the world? What does a typical day look like for you? And Sharon says, when the church's humanitarian services started in 1985 with the famine in Ethiopia, we were a little shop, just taking ideas and trying to implement them. I started work there in 1998. Over time, we specialized in some different things, like when I was running the wheelchair initiative. I was managing the budget, manufacturing relationships, and volunteers. But we don't do that these days. We are now so decentralized. A great portion of the budget and work goes out to the 24 regional offices run by area presidencies. So now at headquarters, our job is to make sure they have the resources and information they need. We are trying to spread best practices. We do a lot of evaluative work. A lot of the things I do are building bridges between governments and church humanitarian services, trying to evaluate what works and what doesn't in a landscape that's constantly changing. As a side note, here is how the 24 regional offices are divided up. There are 6 in the U.S., U.S. Central, U.S. Northeast, U.S. Southeast, U.S. Southwest, U.S. West area, and the Utah area, and there are 18 internationally: Africa Central, Africa South, Africa West, Asia, Asia North, Brazil, Canada, Caribbean, Central America, Eurasian, Europe Central, Europe North, Mexico, Middle East/Africa North, Pacific area, Philippines, South America Northwest, and South America South. Next, the article says, like a lot of people, you used to feel reticent about sending cash as a charitable practice, but you have shifted a bit from that view. Could you describe the evolution? And Sharon answers by saying, I think all of us recognize corruption is real, and it ruins the ability to do a humanitarian project. I was ingrained as a young humanitarian that we just don't give cash, but it turns out from a lot of research that corruption is not nearly as prevalent as we might think. When you give people cash and there's no addiction present and no extortion, they just about 80% of the time will make defensible decisions with what they do with it. It's important because having cash reinforces their ability to choose. Sometimes one of the hardest things about going through a disaster is all your choices get taken away. You can't decide where you live or what you eat or whom you're living with or what will happen to you. The tiniest little choice becomes really important. I actually loved reading that perspective. It's something I hadn't considered, but I am definitely thinking about it now. The article goes on to say, in the book, you stress listening to communities and people when they describe what they want. Sometimes what they want is not what humanitarians were planning to give. And Sharon answers, yeah, one story was told to me by Michael of UNICEF. They went into a community in Central America and said, we really want to focus on your children's health. We'd like to give you a local health clinic. But the community said, no, we don't want a health clinic. We want lights for our soccer field. The community just wouldn't give up. They said, we want the kids to have a safe place at night to play soccer. They're busy working and doing school, but night is the time we need them to be safe. Finally, UNICEF raised the money privately and figured out how to get them lights for the soccer field. It made such a huge change in that community, it became the focal point. Everybody came in the evenings to watch their kids play. It was bonding. The kids were getting physical exercise and all kinds of other activities were happening. There are many different iterations of that story, but it reinforces the idea to ask people what they want and then help them get it. Don't assume you know better. Does Sharon see how different that thinking is than Mormonism's top-down structure? The church's leadership makes decisions for a global membership without a formal mechanism for bottom-up feedback, and yet here, Sharon suggests that listening to the needs and desires of the rank-and-file members who are living the realities of their local communities is a more effective way to lead than relying solely on direction from the top. She better watch out. She's sounding a little apostate. The person interviewing her then says, this seems to be an American issue. We're very take charge, get it done people, but not necessarily the best at listening. And Sharon responds by saying, it's not just Americans. There's a culture in the developed West that says, I have education, I have wealth, I have experience. I am going to come in and teach you what you need to know. The assumption is you're ignorant, you're poor, you have unproductive traditions. We devalue everything about that culture. Does Sharon really not understand how well she is describing her own religion right there? The Mormon Church goes into communities across the world to teach them about the only right and true religious traditions. Because I do my best not to give my monetary support to people who are likely paying tithing with it, I won't be buying Sharon's book to read, but looking at the article was quite insightful. You can find the link in the show notes. Now let's go to a Latter-day Saint women's support group on Facebook for this post. The person making the post lives in Ogden, Utah, and says, "A work associate keeps telling me he sees evidence we are living in a time where we have rejected prophets and doctrine, and the Lord is taking away. I was leery at first, but I am slowly starting to see what he means. Today takes the cake. I sat in on one Sunday school class and 2 Come Follow Me groups. When they talked about gifts of the Spirit, all 3 were not doctrine, blending worldly philosophies with scriptures, did not quote prophets. If scriptures were read at all, it was only the list of gifts. The only takeaway principle was, don't put yourself down if you feel you don't have talents/gifts/abilities. God loves you and you have something. Is this all we can handle right now? Is it possible we as a church are in that state the scriptures talk about when we collectively reject the prophets and their counsel?" I love this post. This woman is highlighting the damned if they do, damned if they don't predicament the Mormon church is in. The church is experiencing a significant decline in retention, particularly among younger generations and women. A large number of members have left or are questioning their faith due to issues with historical doctrine, policy changes, and social friction. In response, the church is shifting its public focus from a message of strict adherence and institutional perfection to one of personal worth and belonging. The goal seems to be to create a more welcoming and less judgmental environment in an effort to keep members from leaving. The message of God loves you and you have something is a powerful counterpoint to a feeling of not being good enough that many members feel. An unintended consequence of this is that some church classes are not quoting prophets or focusing on doctrine as much as they have in the past, and the more orthodox members are noticing. Thus, the church will lose its more liberal members if it doesn't change, and it will lose its more orthodox members if it does. Now let's go to Canada for this information. Cheryl Markowski has made the 2025 CBC Nonfiction Prize long list for her entry, "We Are Baptized for the Dead in Tabor," before going to A&W for burgers and root beer. Born in Calgary, Cheryl Markowski studied television, stage and radio arts at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, followed by a BA in art history and literature with the Open University in London, England. A former TV producer, she's now a journalist and theater reviewer for Broadway World. Alongside writing flash and short stories for New Flash Fiction Review, The Fair, The Molotov Cocktail, Maudlin House, Walk, Listen, Create, where Cheryl was writer-in-residence, and more. Cheryl's also ghosted 2 books for TV's Phil Spencer. Her entry, in 5-ish words, is "Young Mormon Girl Makes Waves." She described the source of her inspiration as taking part in a baptism for the dead ceremony in the enormous font at the Mormon temple in Tabor in southern Alberta was strange, exciting, and ultimately life-changing for me, a 12-year-old girl brought up in a religious family in the Crown's Nest Pass in the Rockies. But rather than cementing my faith, it was the spark for me to begin questioning the rigid rules and patriarchal structures baked into Mormonism. And questioning everything since is now part of my DNA. What did readers have to say? Wisely specific on that heady brew of religious obedience and resistance. Leaves you to wonder, what does it mean to save someone, and what always gets lost in the process? The first lines of her writing say, "We wear white temple garments that make us feel silly and special at the same time, like dressing up as pretend angels with glitter-stuck cardboard crowns that are somehow for real. We go down the steps to the marble font in the temple, where our fathers and other men from the priesthood wait in white temple garments that are equally silly. We could be fooled into thinking they're entering into the spirit of things in ghostly sheets out trick-or-treating with their kids, but we know they're pure and saintly and official." I couldn't find a place to read the entirety of the story, but I hope to. I love it when people describe experiences that are commonplace for Mormons, but weird to outsiders. And last up today, let's finish with this great quote that says, "Modest is hottest" is a grooming narrative to get women to accept that they are sex objects that exist for the approval, pleasure, and entertainment of men. Therefore, it is also a way to normalize predatory behavior in men and avoid accountability when they abuse women. And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.